Giannis Antetokounmpo came to EuroBasket 2022 to deliver a championship for his country. He was the most dominant force in the tournament, an unstoppable hero on a national mission, carrying the weight of Greece on his impossibly broad shoulders. But in the quarterfinals on September 13, 2022, that mission was abruptly ended, not just by a brilliant German national team, but by the referee's whistles. Giannis was ejected, Greece was eliminated, and a furious coach was left to expose the double standard he claimed was ruining the entire competition. This wasn't just a loss, it was an indictment of the officiating that governed the international game. A moment that cast the referees as the true villains of the tournament. The knockout game against Germany was a war. The stakes were immense, a spot in the semifinals and a chance to medal. The atmosphere in Berlin was electric, with thousands of Greek and German fans creating a cauldron of noise. From the opening tip, Giannis was playing like a man possessed, a force of nature that the German defense had no answer for. He was a blur of limbs and muscle, driving to the basket at will, finishing with an incredible line of 31 points, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists in just 30 minutes of play. He was the hero playing the part perfectly, doing everything in his power to drag his team to victory. But with just under 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter and Greece trailing, everything imploded. Giannis, fighting for a loose ball, swiped at German player Johannes Thiemann. His hand made contact with Thiemann's face, and the whistle blew. The referee signaled an unsportsmanlike foul. It was the second of the night, which, under FIBA rules, triggers an automatic ejection. The hero was banished from the court. A look of pure disbelief washed over Giannis's face as he was escorted away, forced to watch the final, decisive minutes from the locker room as his team's dreams died. Germany capitalized, pulling away for a 107-96 victory, and the fallout was just beginning. In the post-game press conference, Greece's head coach, Dimitris Itoudis, came prepared for battle. He was no longer just a coach. He was the hero's defender, and he came armed with receipts in the form of pointed, biting questions. He began by graciously congratulating Germany on their victory, acknowledging their great performance. But he quickly pivoted to the real villain of the night, the inconsistent, and in his view, biased officiating. Itoudis questioned the very criteria for fouls and pointed out a glaring disparity in how different superstars were being treated throughout the tournament, a disparity that had just cost his team everything. While he was careful not to name names directly in his most heated comments, the implication was crystal clear to everyone listening. He was talking about Luka Doncic of Slovenia, the other transcendent NBA superstar dominating the tournament. Itoudis and the entire basketball world had watched as Luka seemed to get the benefit of every doubt, drawing call after call, manipulating the referees with his craftiness. Meanwhile, Giannis, who plays a physically dominant style built on power and aggression, was being penalized for the very same traits that make him a two-time NBA MVP. The coach's rant went viral, framing the debate not just as a loss, but as a systemic failure, a clash between two of the world's best players and the referees who couldn't, or wouldn't, officiate them with the same rulebook. This controversy wasn't just about one game, it was about a pattern of questionable officiating that had plagued the entire tournament. It wasn't just sour grapes from a losing coach. In fact, just days before the Greece-Germany game, FIBA was forced to issue a rare public statement acknowledging 2 serious errors by officials in other tournament games, including a critical missed call in a Lithuania versus Germany match. FIBA announced that the officiating crews involved would not work again in the tournament. This public admission was a bombshell. It was proof from the governing body itself that the system was flawed, lending massive credibility to Itoudis' complaints and confirming the suspicions of fans across Europe. The mid-video reveal is a stark statistical and visual contrast between the treatment of Giannis and other stars, particularly Luka. In EuroBasket 2022, Luka Doncic was a foul-drawing machine. His game, predicated on step-back jumpers, hesitations, and initiating contact, was rewarded handsomely by the FIBA referees. He lived at the free-throw line, using the officials as a weapon to control the pace of the game. Giannis, however, did not receive the same respect. His powerful drives to the basket, where he would absorb incredible amounts of contact, often resulted in baffling no-calls. Defenders were allowed to hack, grab, and push him with an impunity that was not afforded to anyone else. Reviewing clips from the tournament provides damning visual evidence. There are dozens of instances of Giannis being mauled on his way to the rim with no whistle, his arms getting hit, his body getting bumped. In stark contrast, similar, or even less severe, contact on Luka on the perimeter would result in an immediate foul call. The disparity was infuriatingly obvious. The foul that led to Giannis's ejection against Germany was a prime example of this double standard. While he did make contact with the player's face, it was a basketball play, a swipe at the ball in a chaotic moment. It was not malicious or flagrantly unsportsmanlike. It was a judgment call, and in a tournament where Giannis was getting physically punished with no protection from the officials, that final judgment felt less like an enforcement of the rules and more like a targeted removal of a player the referees didn't know how to handle. This disparity in officiating speaks to a larger, more complex issue within international basketball. The FIBA game is traditionally officiated differently than the NBA. It's often more physical, with referees allowing more contact, especially in the post and on drives to the basket. In theory, this should benefit a player like Giannis, but in practice, it became a double-edged sword. His overwhelming strength, a massive advantage, seemed to work against him with the whistles. An insidious logic appeared to be at play among the officials, because Giannis is so strong, the contact he absorbs must not be a foul. He is expected to simply play through it, a standard not applied to any other player. Conversely, players who excel at foul baiting and selling contact can thrive under this inconsistent system. The perception became that if you were a physical marvel like Giannis, you were expected to endure the punishment without complaint. If you were a craftier guard who knew how to snap your head back and flail your arms, the slightest bump would earn you a trip to the free throw line. Coach Atoutis was essentially screaming what many have been thinking for weeks. There wasn't one rulebook for everyone. There was a superstar whistle, but it was only being blown for a certain type of superstar, and it was leaving the most physically dominant player in the world unprotected and unfairly penalized. The reaction to the coach's press conference was nothing short of explosive. It dominated the European and American basketball media for days. Analysts and former players broke down clips, compared foul calls, and debated the merits of Atoutis' claims. A significant majority sided with the Greek coach, pointing to the overwhelming visual evidence of Giannis being subjected to uncalled fouls. They argued that FIBA had a responsibility to protect its biggest stars, regardless of their style of play. A force of nature like Giannis, they contended, shouldn't be effectively punished by the referees for being stronger and more athletic than everyone else on the court. Of course, there were those who took the referees' side, arguing that FIBA basketball has always been more physical and that Giannis and the Greek team needed to adapt their style rather than complain. They pointed out that Giannis' frustration was visible on the court and that his second unsportsmanlike foul, while perhaps a harsh call, was a result of his own aggressive actions. But this defense rang hollow for many, especially in the shadow of FIBA's own admission of major officiating errors just days earlier. The referees had lost the benefit of the doubt. Their credibility was already compromised, and this latest incident seemed to confirm the worst fears about their competence and impartiality. The legacy of this moment is complex and far-reaching. For the Greek national team, it was a heartbreaking end to a tournament where they had legitimate championship aspirations. For Giannis, it added another frustrating chapter to the ongoing narrative that he struggles to get a fair whistle from officials, a frustration that has followed him from the NBA to the international stage. He is famously tight-lipped when it comes to criticizing referees, knowing that public complaints only lead to hefty fines and a reputation as a complainer. But his coaches are not always so reserved, and in this instance, Atoutis became his public defender. For the referees, the undisputed villains of the story, the incident was a massive black eye for FIBA. Their job is to be invisible, to enforce the rules of the game fairly, and allow the players on the court to decide the outcome. But in the biggest game of the tournament, on the brightest stage with the world watching, they became the central figures. Their controversial calls and their inconsistent standards overshadow the incredible performances on the court. They made a star player's ejection the main headline, not the game itself. They aimed to control the game, but in the end, their whistles only created chaos, controversy, and doubt. The entire episode served as a powerful reminder of the subjective nature of officiating and the immense pressure referees are under in high-stakes environments. But it also validated the feelings of millions of fans who believe the game isn't always called fairly, that superstars are treated differently, and that sometimes the officials get it wrong at the worst possible moment. Coach Attuti stood up for his player, armed with the evidence of his own eyes and the support of a nation, and forced the entire basketball world to confront an uncomfortable truth about the state of its officiating. The villain aimed to destroy a hero's championship dream, but ultimately destroyed their own credibility.